Okay, so this tutorial is again to go over how to create a good menu system on Greenfoot. The last video, whilst it worked, caused a few issues, especially when there were screens that were linking back to each other, and it created kind of infinite loops. Now the reason for that was mainly because although we weren't showing the screen, we were actually creating the screen before passing it to the button. So it was causing some issues. So I'd like to look at how to rework this to a better system. So the first thing we're going to do on here is I'm going to create a new subclass here. And I'm going to call this start. Now, although this is going to look like a screen, it's actually not going to ever be shown. And what this is going to do, this is just going to be used to create all of the screens that are going to be used in our game and send them to the buttons. So now we've got that created. First thing I'm going to do is delete this one because we're not going to need this. And then we're going to look at, okay, which screens that we're going to have. So let's have a main screen. And a play screen. And the main screen is going to have a button that will link to the play, and the play will have a button that will go back to the main screen. So once we've got those ready, first we're going to do in our start here is we're going to set the screens up. So I'm going to create a main screen. And I'm going to create a play screen. Now, once this start is called, I'm not going to worry about this, to be honest, because it's not going to make any difference. I can just leave that whatever numbers, because this screen is never actually going to be shown. I'm going to instantiate the main screen and the play one. Capital M. Okay, and then I'm going to start basically my application. So I'm going to say my first world that I want to start with is the main screen. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Should be new main, new play. Does that get rid of the error? Okay, great. So what we'll do now is we will say that our starting page is the start one. But actually, when this starts up, the first thing it's going to do is create the main and play screen and load the main screen first. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our button class, which we're going to put on the screens. So let's create a button. And this is going to be very similar to the button that we used last time. So within it, it's going to contain a link to a world. It's going to need a constructor. And the constructor is going to receive the image that we're going to use for the button and the link, okay, that we're going to set it to. And in here we'll set the image for the button to the one that's been sent to us. Okay, and we will set the link to the one, also to the one that's been sent to us here. Okay, the only other thing we're going to add in here now is if the button's on screen, then if we click on the button, we want it to go to the new screen. So if the mouse clicks on this object, so Greenfoot, set the world to whatever this button is linked to. Okay. Let's just compile that, make sure we've got no errors there. Okay, so back to the main screen now. And on here, we're going to create a button that will link to the play screen. So let's create the option first up here, the button object. Okay, let's make this window a little bit bigger. Okay, and then here we're going to say play button equals a new button. We're going to use this image, which I've loaded into the image folder, and we're going to link it to the play world. And then we say add object play button at this position on the screen. Okay, so the only thing we don't have at the moment, we don't have this link to the play world. So when this world is created, we're going to need to pass it some information. So it needs to receive a world, which we will call play, because we know this one is going to link to play. Okay, so we can compile that. Okay, and we've got one error in here at the moment. Oh, created that in completely in the wrong place. Should be down here in the properties. Okay, now this has brought up an error on the start now, and this is because we changed the constructor of the play. So now on the start, we know we've got to send it a link now to the play world. Okay, now this is where we're going to start having a few little problems, and I'll show you why. Okay, so the button's been created here, as we would expect. Okay, but if I run this and I click on this here, you can see that it thinks that the link is null. It doesn't realize that the link has got to go to play. And it's mainly because we've got a bit of a chicken and egg situation where we want to send it to play world, but play world hasn't been created yet because it gets created here. So at this point, we can't really do this. So the way we're going to get around that is we're not actually going to do this when the main world is created. We're going to create all the worlds first, and then we're going to set up all the buttons. So we're going to have a new method in here, which will be called create buttons. And here is where we will receive the world that we want to link to the buttons. Okay, I'm going to take the code from here and move it down here. Okay, so when the world is created now, we don't need that anymore. So when the world's created, it's just going to set up a blank screen. And then if we use the create buttons method, then it will create the buttons on the screen for us. So back into our start code, what we'll do here now is we'll just create the screens first. We'll create the main and create the play. And after they've been created, we will then call the create buttons method and send it the buttons that we need it to create. So if we compile all that, just an S, I think it should be okay. Right, so if we go back to the application now and try it. Great, so you saw the screen size change because the play screen at the moment is set smaller. So it has worked. So now on the play code here, we'll set this to the same size. And we're going to take the same method basically that we used here on the main and now use it on the play. So in this case, we're going to send it back to main. And we'll use a different image just so you can see that it's changed. Let's be a bit better than that. Let's call this back to main. The only other thing now is to create the button up here. Okay, so let's compile that. That's all compiled okay. Okay, so we didn't see, now the reason we didn't see it is because in my start, I created the play screen here, but I forgot to run the create buttons method. So if you remember on the play one, we need to pass it one world because it's only got one button, and that's for the main. So we're going to pass it a link to the main world. Okay, so we click on the main, we go to the play, we click on the play, we go back to the main. Great, so that's the basics of it set up. There is a second part to this tutorial that you'll need to watch if any of your screens contain kind of movement, because that will also cause a few issues, and there'll be another few things that you would need to set up to incorporate that. But I'll leave that for the second tutorial.